Hello folks, welcome back to Canada's Boxing Channel. I hope everyone's having a good day. If you're watching the fight card, I hope your wagers come in. I've got my bets placed, but I've not been having a great run of form with the bookies of late. I put some money on the Canadian card yesterday, and it was I may as well have set fire to it. Anyways, you know, the other day I was, of course, watching the Chris Eubank Jr. Conor Benn press conference, and amongst much of what I heard, and much of which I was trying to, kind of almost not hear, there was one thing that Chris Eubank Jr. said about boxing not being a team sport. And now, strictly speaking, he's quite correct. I mean, at the precise time that he's in the ring, trading blows with his opponent, he's not permitted to get assistance from anybody. He can get people yelling, but he can't get physical help. It's not a team sport in that concept. In the same way that a professional golfer, when teeing off or putting out, can't get physical assistance. It's not a team sport. But we all recognize in professional golf that a caddy is super important throughout the round and probably in the training of the golfer. Likewise, in boxing, the cut man, the other persons in the corner, and the trainer provide essential services to get that boxer to be in the best position possible to win their fight inside the ring. So in many respects, it is a team sport. And the role of trainers, I think we now recognize, is very important. You know, some boxers will always speak about it as being a team thing. So like Joe Parker. Joe Parker will always say, George Lockhart, my strength and conditioning coach, Andy Lee, my trainer, like he recognizes it's a team. You know, when you're talking to Joe Parker, you really understand that in Joe's mind, his team is absolutely essential. And he will often say, you know, the team. He doesn't often say I. He will say the team. It's just his way. You know, in the sort of a middle of the road area, you know, Tyson Fury will acknowledge the contributions of Sugar Hill Stewart. But he doesn't sort of go on about it all the time. You know, clearly he understands the importance. And then at the other extreme, you know, you've got Daniel Dubois, who will almost sort of try to go out of his way not to mention the existence of Don Charles. He will, of course, be effusive and respectful of the role that his father plays, and that's wonderful. I mean, you know, to see. But it's almost like Don Charles doesn't exist. And if you didn't know that Don Charles was the trainer of Daniel Dubois, you're not really going to pick up on that from listening to Daniel talk at press conferences and whatnot. Now, today, if we were to ask people in, you know, the sports bar today when you're watching the fights, you know, name some top trainers, they probably would say, you know, Sugar Hill Stewart, Don Charles, Ben Davidson. If they are fans of Alexander Usyk, they'd say Sergey Lapin. But, you know, they're not sort of likely to know about famous trainers from the past. Maybe a generation ago, they'll say Manny Stewart, you know, Lennox Lewis, his trainer, the Kronk gym sort of thing. But what I thought would be useful, as you know, I like talking about the fighters from yesteryear and to keep their memories alive and to talk about their achievements and to, you know, really remind myself and maybe remind you that these great fighters existed. And some of the videos have been, you know, they're not super well watched compared to others, but I think they, you know, people like them. And I thought, well, you know, I should talk about, say, half a dozen, 6 of the best, if you like, 6 of the best trainers from yesteryear. I'm not saying that these are the top 6. And I'm not saying that if somebody isn't on this list, they're not as good as the people on this list. I mean, I kind of scratched out the names of 6 trainers that I thought, yeah, those guys were top notch. Some before my time, some during my time. And I thought, yeah, I'll do a video just so that we can all collectively remember who these guys were. As most of you will recognize probably all of the names, though maybe a couple of them you'll go, ah, yeah, that guy. And maybe if you're a much younger fan and you don't really have the time to invest in the history of the sport, you'll go, never heard of him. And the purpose of this isn't to sort of, go from soup to nuts about each of these trainers. In fact, far from it. This is just a scratch of the surface. And it's really to remind us of who they were and to encourage you, if you're interested, to do a little bit more digging, to find out about these trainers and who they worked with and what their achievements were. So they're in no particular order. I just scratched out some notes, and we'll just work our way through them. And you must let me know what you think in the comments section by putting a little like on. And if you're new to the channel, subscribing, because we cover a variety of things here. Current, latest stuff, and of course the historical stuff, which clearly I'm most interested in, I think, because I really like the history of the sport very much, as you know. Okay, so the first guy let's talk about was born in 1883, and he died sadly in 1942. He himself was a lightweight and welterweight. He had 147 fights under his belt, and he's none other than Jack Chappie Blackburn. He fought 6 times against Sam Langford, 3 times against Joe Gans. He went 1 time with Harry Greb, who was one of the greatest fighters ever, and 1 time with Gunboat Smith. He trained the 1926 lightweight champion Sammy Mandel and the bantamweight champion Bud Taylor. He spent 4.5 years in jail for shootings, which he apparently instigated. So he was not a choir boy. No, sir, Chappie Blackburn was not a choir boy. But he's most famous for training the Brown Bomber, none other than the great Joe Louis. And in fact, he was in the corner on June the 22nd, 1937, when Joe Louis took the title from Jim Braddock. And he also trained Jersey Joe Walcott for a while. Now, unfortunately, Chappie Blackburn died of a cardiac arrest in 1942, so he didn't get to see the entirety of Joe Louis's career. But he was instrumental in bringing Joe Louis to the peak of the heavyweight division. And clearly, he and Joe Louis had a really good partnership. They worked really, really well together. So I think we should all remember Chappie Blackburn, who was initiated into the Hall of Fame in 1992. Undoubtedly a great trainer. The second fellow that we should talk about, and I think most of you will know this fellow, is none other than Customado. Customado was born in 1908 and he lived until 1985. Famous for producing the youngest heavyweight champion in the world. Not once, but twice. He trained Floyd Patterson, both through the Olympics and his professional career. And Floyd Patterson won the world title at the age of 21 years and 10 months on November the 30th, 1956, by beating Archie Moore, the old mongoose, by knockout in 5 rounds. Customado also trained Jose Torres, who was the world light heavyweight champion, who beat Willie Pastrano in 1965. Customado, of course, to modern fans, is most famous for the work he did with the person who became and beat Floyd Patterson's record, the youngest heavyweight champion in the world, none other than Iron Mike Tyson. Now, he met Tyson when Tyson was a underprivileged inner city youth, and it's fair to say, I think, if Mike had not met Cus D'Amato, who became like a surrogate father, or possibly like a surrogate grandfather figure, I think that's probably better. Who knows what Mike would have ended up doing. Mike came from certainly an impoverished, underprivileged inner city background, and like so many kids who have that demographic, they end up in trouble, and sadly many of them don't sort of really get out of their teens. Well, Cus D'Amato, he worked with Mike Tyson, and he inculcated into Mike Tyson an absolute love, not just of the sport, but of the history of the sport. And if you listen to Mike Tyson talk, Mike Tyson is an absolute font of knowledge about the sport of boxing and the history of boxing. Mike Tyson is one of those fellows who speaks very respectfully about fighters who were active long before he was born. And for that, I always sort of, tip my hat to Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, of course, won the world heavyweight title after Cus D'Amato passed away. So I like to think that Cus D'Amato was looking down from his perch in heaven and looking at his protege, Iron Mike, who was that time was of course trained by Kevin Rooney, who had been a protege of Cus D'Amato. Tyson, of course, became the youngest heavyweight champion, beating Floyd Patterson's record at the age of 20 years and 4 months. So, Cus D'Amato produced two of the youngest heavyweight champions ever, and they're very similar style. Floyd Patterson and Mike Tyson both had that peekaboo style. Mike Tyson was a bigger, slightly harder hitting version of Floyd Patterson, but let's not forget how good Floyd Patterson was. Many people sort of write off Floyd Patterson because of the devastating losses he took against Sonny Liston. But if you want to see how tough Floyd Patterson was, go look at his fight against George Chuvalo. Floyd Patterson was a very, very good heavyweight champion of the world. Iron Mike, we know all about Iron Mike. But yes, both those fellows owed their career success, at least in Mike's early careers anyhow, to the influence of Cus D'Amato. So that's the second of our 6 of the best. Now we move to possibly the most well-known of these trainers. Give me 1 second here. It's fair to say, if you are working with a naturally gifted athlete, your task is probably easier than if you're working with somebody who hasn't been so well blessed. Well, Angelo Dundee, who was born in 1921 and passed away in 2012, who actually took the name Dundee after Johnny Dundee, his birth name was Marina, served in World War II. He had a number of naturally gifted athletes under his charge. Sugar Ray Leonard, George Foreman, 1991 and 1994. When 1994, he beat Michael Moorer to become the oldest heavyweight champion in the world. Angelo Dundee also looked after Jimmy Ellis, Carmen Basilio, Willie Pastrano, Pinklon Thomas, and Michael Nunn. Very, very, very accomplished trainer. He might have looked after somebody else. Yes, of course. He's most well known for having looked after none other than the greatest of them all, according to some, Muhammad Ali. Angelo Dundee was in the corner of every one of Ali's fights, save 2. And, of course, Muhammad Ali was a naturally gifted athlete. You know, if you were going to design the perfect heavyweight, it's kind of hard to say that Ali wouldn't fit that mold. But Angelo Dundee brought him to the peak of the profession Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Very famously, Howard Cosell, who was a sports journalist, sports writer, confidant in some ways of Ali, famously said, "If I had a son who wanted to box and I couldn't talk him out of it, the only man I'd let train him would be Dundee." Such was the reputation for fairness, honesty, and trustworthiness that Angelo Dundee had. Angelo Dundee, while he was gifted with the perfect physical specimen to work with in Muhammad Ali, didn't have it all easy. As we know, there were many other influences on Muhammad Ali. In the 1960s and 70s, he was influenced greatly by Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad, the so-called black Muslims at the time. And then laterally, Don King played a major role in Muhammad Ali's life and career. And so Angelo Dundee had some very tricky waters to navigate to stay relevant and stay connected to Muhammad Ali, given the pulling and the pushing of many people in that orbit. So I think for that we should certainly respect the work that Angelo Dundee did, not just in the ring with his star fighter, but for his diplomacy and political skills in managing what must have been a very difficult situation. So there's Angelo Dundee. I think most people know of Angelo Dundee. If you ask people in the sports bar today, who was Muhammad Ali's trainer, I would expect that most people, if they're boxing fans, will say Angelo Dundee. Now, the next person we're going to talk about definitely had the antidote to Muhammad Ali, and that's none other than Eddie Futch, who lived from 1911 till 2001 and was himself in 1935 the Detroit Golden Gloves. He always wished to follow that famous boxing adage, kill the body and then the head dies. He trained most famously Joe Frazier, and he taught him how to crouch. He would stretch a rope across the ring diagonally and he would make Frazier go under, 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 under. He also trained somebody else who beat Muhammad Ali. He trained Ken Norton and he got him to out-jab Ali. Ali had a great jab, but he got Norton to out-jab Ali. And it's arguable, of course, Ali had a trilogy with Frazier, which was 2-1 in Ali's favor, most famously losing the first one and losing it comprehensively. Most people forget, but the scores were like 9-6, it wasn't that close. And many people would say that the trilogy he had with Norton, Ali was lucky to win 2 out of 3. I don't know. I'm a big Ali fan, but I can see a case being made for Norton winning 2 of the 3. Your mileage may vary. Eddie Futch also trained Larry Holmes, Michael Spinks, Trevor Burbeck. Michael Spinks, of course, was one of the very best light heavyweights. Larry Holmes, of course, has Ali's name on his record, as does Trevor Burbeck, though Ali should not have been in the ring, in my view, with either of those fellows, and especially not with Trevor Burbeck. One of my favourite Tyson fights is actually seeing Mike Tyson and Trevor Burbeck. It warms the cockles of my heart, as my dear old mum would say, to see Trevor Burbeck put on Queer Street by Iron Mike. Eddie Futch also trained Riddick Bowe at the time he beat Evander Holyfield. Riddick Bowe, who, had he been a bit more focused and disciplined, might well be considered an all-time great. Still a very good fighter, not to be underestimated. Eddie Futch also trained Montel Griffin at the time he beat Roy Jones Jr. and Don Jordan, a 1958 World Welterweight Champion. So Eddie Futch had a great career, but most famously, he was kryptonite to Muhammad Ali. He had the key to Muhammad Ali. He could figure him out, And the fighters who beat Ali were trained by Eddie Futch. Now, we talked about Angelo Dundee having the perfect physical specimen to work with in Muhammad Ali. It's a sort of a trainer's dream to have such a naturally gifted athlete. Well, there was a famous trainer who had his star pupil, if you like. He was 5'11", stoop-shouldered, balding, clumsy, late to the professional game, with a very, very short 69-inch reach for a heavyweight. And that's none other than Charley Goldman, who was born in 1887 and died in 1968, and his star pupil was none other than Rocky Marciano. Now, Charley Goldman himself had 400 fights, many of which are, of course, in that quasi-legal world. I think officially it's supposed to be 137, but by his own reckoning it was 400. He was born in Warsaw, Poland. He's a Jewish gentleman, and he was a tiny wee fellow, 5'1" tall. And in addition to training The Rock, he trained Al McCoy, who was the middleweight champion, Lou Ambers, the lightweight champion, Joey Archibald, the featherweight champion, and the very, very rugged heavyweight contender, Oscar Bonavena. So, but with Rocky Marciano, he absolutely brought Rocky to the peak. He said he liked to work with fighters' natural skills. He didn't like to change anybody. And he said, if you've got a tall fighter, make him taller. If you've got a short fighter, make him shorter. What he did with Rocky Marciano, he would tie his ankles together to narrow his stance. And he also taught him to throw punches in bunches, combination punches, rather than to rely upon that big bomb that Rocky liked to throw. Of course, he didn't forget how to throw the big bomb, as Jersey Joe Walcott found in the 13th round when he was introduced to Susie Q. Sometimes when people would say to Charley Goldman, your fighter Rocky looks awful, he looks ugly, he looks terrible in the ring. And when people would criticize him, he would say, Rocky don't look too good in there, but the guy on the ground don't look too good either. So Charley Goldman, little tiny Jewish guy, trained Rocky Marciano, who, as we know, is the only heavyweight champion to retire undefeated, 49-0. God bless you, Rocky. And I've left maybe the best for last, but maybe it's my own personal bias. A gentleman who trained Lou Ambers, a gentleman who trained Henry Armstrong, a gentleman who trained Muhammad Ali for 2 fights. The 2 fights that Angelo Dundee wasn't there. Jimmy Ellis and Buster Mathis. He learned his trade from Chappie Blackburn. He was an amateur boxer himself. And he lived from 1907 until 1972. Talking about none other than Harry Wiley. And why did I leave him to last? Why is he my favourite? It's because his fighter is my favourite. He trained for 25 years, the incomparable Sugar Ray Robinson, who in my entirely personal, subjective, absolutely biased view, is the greatest boxer to ever get into the ring. I am absolutely not a fanboy of anybody who's active today, but I will confess to being a fanboy of Sugar Ray Robinson. And Harry Wiley was with him from every step of the way. We're not going to get into Sugar Ray Robinson's record. I don't have another 30 minutes. But Sugar Ray Robinson is universally recognized as the best pound-for-pound fighter ever. Muhammad Ali has said that he was the greatest ever. Joe Louis said he was the greatest ever. Sugar Ray Leonard says that Sugar Ray Robinson was the greatest ever. Your mileage may vary. There's an argument to be made for Benny Leonard, Harry Greb, Sam Langford, Henry Armstrong, all legends. But as Bert Sugar said, you've got all these legends on the Mount Olympus of boxing, and at the very, very top, you've got Sugar Ray Robinson. Now, I am a fanboy, but I'm not blind to the fact that Sugar Ray Robinson, like every human being ever, was a flawed character. And one of Sugar Ray Robinson's many flaws was that he didn't really like to share the limelight. He never really spoke about anybody's success to take it away from his own. Sugar Ray Robinson was very, very proud, and justifiably very, very proud of his success in the ring. But he didn't really want to share that. He wasn't your Joe Parker who talked about the team, the team, the team. He would be more like your Dubois, who wouldn't really say too much about the trainer. However, it's clear that he did like and respect and need Harry Wiley. There's one quote that underlines this. Harry Wiley was going fishing, and so some members of the entourage that was with Sugar Ray Robinson went along with him. Sugar Ray was the first boxer to have an entourage, and the word was coined to describe the myriad of people that were hanging around Sugar Ray when he was at his best. And he said to one member of this team that was going off fishing with Harry Wiley, "When Wiley stands on the bank, if he falls in the water or gets into trouble, you go get him, because I need him." High praise indeed from the incomparable Sugar Ray Robinson to his coach for the entirety of his career, Harry Wiley. Now here's a tip. If you're in your sports bar and you're watching the fights, ask the guy next to you, who was Sugar Ray Robinson's trainer? Chances are you might be able to win a couple of beers, because Harry Wiley is not well remembered. And despite Muhammad Ali's efforts in the 1970s to get him inducted into the Hall of Fame, he never did, which is shameful, really. So it's an opportunity to have a little bit of a sports pub quiz, or to win a couple of bucks. Ask people if they know who Harry Wiley was. Anyways, if you've liked this video, please like. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. If you're a frequent visitor but you haven't subscribed, please hit that little button and subscribe. Most importantly, wherever you are in the world, have a fabulous day. Leave comments in the comments section. I'll get to them all. It's one of the highlights of my day, is looking and responding to comments. Thank you very much for your time. Cheers. Bye-bye.